Hello everybody, in this video I'll be painting up a Primaris Space Marine Librarian. As usual, I started off with a base coat of Chaos Black from a rattle can, and then using the appreciating technique through an airbrush I applied white to the upper parts of the model. I only apply this on the areas where the light would hit the model. The best way to do this is straight from above, but you can do it in a little bit of an upward angle. Once that's dry, I coat the entire model in a couple of coats of thinned down French blue. And as you can see through the appreciating technique, there's an instant transition from the shadow to the lighter parts. And then I coated the entire model in gloss varnish. I did this to change the surface tension so that the next layer would easier stick into the recesses. So for this next layer I took a little bit of lamp black oil paint and I mixed it in to some white spirit or some mineral spirit. Do this in a well ventilated room. You can get a horrible headache from this. And then I pin washed all the armor panels of the model, and because of the gloss varnish, the wash isn't going to stick on the upper parts, on the middle parts of the armor. Once that's dry, I gave the model a dull coat to take away the gloss varnish effect, and I made a mixture of French blue and white in a 1:1 ratio, and I applied an edge highlight to all the armor panels on the model. For the next layer, I added one part white to this picture, and I reinforced the edge highlight on the highest parts. As you can see here, I only pick out the most upper part, the tips of the fingers, and the most outer edges on the model. Next, I made a mixture of 1 part charred brown and 1 part leather brown, and I started painting the entire cape with it. I made the paint a little bit too thin, so it took quite some coats to get nice coverage. Then using pure leather brown, I went over the outside of the cape again to paint it in this color. The inside, which is going to be red, I left in the previous layer. Then I took gory red and I painted the inside in. I did this in this way so that I already could see what color would go where, and it makes it easier to focus on the edges of those parts, and make sure you don't go to the wrong areas whilst building the colors up. So then I started building up the color on the cape, and I started off with a mixture of 2 parts leather brown and 1 part bone white, and I started painting the initial highlights in. You don't need to be super precise with this, just make sure you leave the deepest recesses alone and start building from there. Next I made a mixture of 1 part leather brown and 1 part bone white, and I repeated this process, building up the color towards the highlighted area, so towards the area where you want the most light to be hitting the model. And I constantly do this in a couple of thin coats. This also makes it easier to create a transition. If you hit one part a couple of times with the same paint, the color will get more strength, and so you create a better transition. Next, in a mixture of 1 part leather brown with 2 parts bone white, I again go over the cape. The cape took quite some time. And again, in a couple of thin coats, I built this color up, making sure the previous layers stay a little bit visible, so we get a nice transition. And then in a mixture of 1 part leather brown and 4 parts bone white, I do this all again. And again, I stay away from the previous layer in the where the shading begins, and build this color up towards the outside of the cape. And then for the final layer, I use a mixture of 1 part leather brown and 6 parts bone white. And I repeat the process again. And as you can see, a nice transition appears throughout this entire process. It takes time, but the results are really nice. At least I think the results are really nice. So now on to the red parts, and you're gonna be need to be a little bit careful with this, obviously, to not hit the white or the creamy parts. I start off with a mixture of 2 parts gory red and 1 part bloody red, and I basically start highlighting the cape from the inside out. For the next layer, where the mixture is in a 1 part gory red, 2 part bloody red ratio, I, as you can see, do this again, making sure I leave a little bit of the previous layer visible. So now we have a transition from the inside to the outside. I'm going to build up on the outside of the red a little bit in a couple of layers. And the first one is 1 part gory red and 6 part bloody red. And basically this is a really thick edge highlight just on the most visible parts. And I finish it off with a thin edge highlight of pure bloody red. On the bottom I built this up a little bit thicker, not so much in thicker paint, but in a thicker line to get the desired effect. Next I went on and blocked all the metallic parts in with black metal. Just make sure you don't hit any already painted parts and just get this color on there. I then blocked in all the golden parts on the model using old copper. It's the same thing as with the metallic with black metal. Just make sure you don't hit any of the blue, red or creamy parts and just get this color on there. Then using Nuln oil, I washed all the metallic parts, get a shading effect in there. And once that has been applied, I use Airbrush Earthshade and do the same thing to the golden parts. So with all the shading done on the metallic parts, we can start painting them in. And I start off with gunmetal for the metallic parts, and on the small parts I just place a tiny edge highlight, and where possible I sort of like dry brush it on, like on these wires and these bigger parts on the feet. And the other leg is hardly visible, so I didn't really do a lot of painting on that leg, because this is a game model, so chances are you really are not going to see that. Then using dwarven gold, I went over the same procedure for the golden parts as I just did for the metallic parts. Where possible, just sort of like dry brush it on, and otherwise just paint this on in a really thin line. Next, using silver, I highlighted both the golden and the metallic parts, and I nearly applied this everywhere in an edge highlight manner. Only on these larger surfaces again, semi-dry brushing manner. Next I took Seraphim Sepia and I washed all the golden parts with it. This helps the silver turn into a little bit more gold-like color. Personally, I don't like pure silver edges on golden parts. It takes away from the gold effect you actually try to achieve with the gold. So the largest part of the model is now painted, so now we can start focusing on the details, and I started off using earth and painted all the parchments on the model with it. He has a book on the front, and I painted the papers following the method I'm going to do the parchments for the purity seals as well. I then took charred brown and I painted in this little piece of belt the Librarian has hanging there, and this is then followed by a really rough highlight of one part charred brown and one part earth on this belt. There's no need to be super precise, just make sure you stay away from the deepest recesses. Stay a little bit, let a little bit of the charred earth visible. Next, using Agar's Earthshade, I washed all the parchments and the leather part, the little belt. And once that was dry, I went on and highlighted the parchments up with using earth as a first layer. I leave little bits of the previous coats visible so that we get a nice transition from dark to light. This is then followed by a mixture of 1 part earth and 1 part bone, and I repeat this process, leaving a little bit of the pure earth from the previous layer visible, just building up over the edges in a edge highlighting manner, but not in a super thin line. And once that has been applied to all of them, I repeat this process with bone white, but this time in a much thinner line, as you can see here. By painting the parchments in this manner, you actually can avoid having to paint text in there, which can be pretty hard. Now there's already a lot going on in there, so painting in text would be kind of useless. So I went back to the 1 part charred brown and 1 part earth mixture. And this time, being a bit neater, I highlighted the leather belt. This is then followed by an edge highlight of earth. Which then finishes off the belt. I took a dark flesh tone and I blocked in all these red parts on the purity seals. Also, the cover of the book was painted in the same method. I then made a mixture of 1 part dark flesh tone and 1 part gory red, and I applied a rough initial highlights on these seals. Also paint a little bit on the inside, but just leave a little bit of the dark flesh tone visible in the most deepest recesses there. Then using gory red, I start building this color up a little bit, going over the same steps, just leaving a little bit of the previous layers visible. And to finish him off, I repeated with pure bloody red, staying as much as possible on the outsides, leaving all the recesses alone. In the middle of the seal parts you can paint a little dot of bloody red. Next I went on to the wires on the model, and I started off with the big ones in the going from the shoulder to the back, and I started off with Parasite Brown and just blocked them in. Parasite Brown is a pretty good base to start a yellow with. Obviously when you use the black undercoat or dark undercoat. Then using Scrofulous Brown, I nearly painted over the entire cable. I left the Parasite Brown only in the very deepest recesses visible. I then made a mixture of 2 parts Scrofulous Brown and 1 part Dead White, and I applied a highlight from the top to the bottom, not going all the way in, as you can see on those big cables. So for the back, I stayed on the upside of the cables. Next I added 1 part Dead White to this mixture, and I did it again, but not just staying more towards the upside of the cable. So I wanted to have a little bit of an effect visible from those ribs in there. So I made a mixture of roughly 1 part Reichland Flesh Shade and 1 part Lavender Yellow. I thought I was going to need more Lavender Yellow, but I ended up wanting more Reichland Flesh Shade in there, so just use a little bit more of the Flesh Shade than of the Lavender Yellow, and then just wash the cables with it. Try not to let it pool. So then onto the small other cables. There's 2 on each arm left over, and I decided to paint 2 blue and 2 green. And for the blue ones, I started off with a coat of dark blue, which I then highlighted with a mixture of 1 part dark blue and 1 part electric blue. And I built this up towards the top, same as with the yellow cable, and then I added 2 parts electric blue to the mixture and strengthened this highlight up. And I then finish it off with a little bit of pure electric blue. just on the top where most of the light would fall. Then it was onto the green cables, and I started off with thick green and just blocked those other two cables in. I had some trouble getting this on camera, and actually this angle was the only one I could really get. So I'm sorry it's not really clear, but it goes through the same procedure as the blue one. So the pure thick green is going to be followed by a coat of 1 part thick green and 1 part escropaner green. And then I added 2 parts escropaner green to the mixture and strengthened the previous highlight a little bit up. And I finished it off with pure escropaner green. Again, just a little bit on the upside, just to have that light effect. Next, it was onto the blade. I decided to go for a green magical look. I started off with painting the entire blade black, and then using escropaner green in a couple of coats. I painted in the lines and the text on the back of the blade. As you can see, the paint doesn't really want to stick on there, so it took a bit of time. And the inside of the hand, I just dabbled a bit of the escropaner green in, and this little third eye thingy and the eyes, the same thing. As for the light effect on the eyes, make sure you don't go above the eye, stay underneath the eye. Due to the shape of the helmet, the light wouldn't be able to fall on his eyebrow. It can only go down. You can paint the inside of the eyebrow though, looking from the eye. Next, I went over all these same areas again with library green and building it up as a highlight. So, for example, these lines, I didn't go all the way back. And on the tip of the sword, it's okay to be a little bit messy there. Just spread it out a bit, as you can see. Once done, I went back in with black to clean all the parts up a little bit. So for the third eye thingy, the eyes and the hand, it's the same thing. And as you can see with the eye, I strengthen it from the outside towards the inside. Next, following the same method, I painted on that white. And the white in itself, its only function is to have the yellow stick later on. So again, I just reinforced this previous layer, but this time it looks very extreme because it's white. I paint in the inner parts of the eye and the third eye, and the same goes for the hand. Just a little bit of white in there. And after this I took moon yellow and I made sure I got the airbrush right, because that doesn't want to stick on anything except on white. So you don't need to be super neat now, because you're not gonna paint over the green or the black anyway. And just go over all the white parts to get that glow going. So I took the model for a dull coat after that. After cleaning up, I took it for a dull coat. And when that was dry, I used the Mia Clear and I put a coat of that on the blade. And then I stick the model on the base, and this is the end result. So I hope you liked this video, and if you do, please like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment. If you didn't like this video and you're going to dislike it, that's okay. But please be kind enough to let me know what you didn't like so I can improve on that. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye bye.